Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to this edition of Monday Morning Musings, where we are going to continue on part 2 of You Can't Blame Constantine for Everything. Now, there's some history that goes with the belief that Constantine was the beginning of all the problems with Christianity, and Constantine and Christianity this, Constantine Christianity that. There's a narrative that supports that belief system, and I want to talk to you about some of the foundations of that narrative and some recent archaeological discoveries, and some not so recent, that basically pull the plug or undermine any sort of legitimacy to this narrative. And the narrative is this: that at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, which I think was the 318 or something like that, allegedly Constantine sees the sign of the cross in the sky, and this sign conquer. We talked about that last time. I don't think there's a shred of legitimacy. I don't know what he saw, but I don't believe in a savior that uses the cross as a sign for war, victory, and killing people. But in order for the modern narrative to work, that is supposedly the day that Constantine had an awakening and he became a Christian. And we mentioned in the last episode, he wasn't officially baptized until the end of his life, on his pretty much his deathbed. So allegedly, Constantine becomes a Christian in 318 or whatever it was at the Milvian Bridge. And that it was the beginning of great days for the church until, he makes the church a licit religious association. He stops the persecution. But boy, he just goofed up a little bit by wedding the church and state, money and power politics and all that. Here's the situation. There is a verified, known letter from the 18th century, discovered in 1733, written by Constantine himself. The date is confirmed. It's undebatable. It's authentic. It was him. And he was writing to a town called Flavia Contas, I believe. I might be pronouncing that incorrectly. But in this letter that Constantine wrote post-conversion, he is instructing this town, Flavia Constantine, I think, something like that, that giving them permission to build a temple dedicated to the pagan deities, as long as they agreed to include in the building of this pagan temple inscriptions and devotions honoring his divine ancestors. Folks, a genuine conversion, or someone who is the product of a genuine conversion, doesn't authorize building a pagan temple to worship his divine ancestors or to honor his divine ancestors. As I said in the other podcast, Constantine was a pragmatist politician, and he was a good one. He was good at it. But so not only do we have that evidence, it's undisputable, but you probably never heard of it, like I never heard of it, because it ruins the little mythical narrative we tell ourselves about our own history. Recently, researchers from the University of St. Louis in the United States have discovered the ruins of a pagan temple in Spello, S-P-L-L-O, Italy, dated right smack into the middle of Constantine's reign. Right in the middle of it. As a matter of fact, within a few years of the Council of Nicaea. My point is, we have the letter, and now we have archaeological evidence, irrefutable proof, that the transition from just worldwide paganism to Christianity was a process, or a process, as my British and Canadian friends would say. It didn't happen because of a crisis conversion that Constantine had at the Milvian Bridge, which I don't believe in. Because these 2 points of evidence are not something that comes from somebody who's a follower of Jesus Christ. Now, the typical fundamentalist or evangelical argument is going to be, well, he was just a baby Christian and he didn't really understand what he was doing. Nonsense. Baloney. Baloney. He was the emperor. He could do and say anything he wanted. And what he wanted to do and say was keep his empire at peace and together. And he would accommodate anything to accomplish that goal. So there's no valorization of Constantine as a great hero of the faith. I think it's, listen, I'm an Eastern Orthodox guy, but I think it's a huge mistake to make him a saint of the church. Huge mistake, historically baseless. But on the other hand, as we touched on the last episode, you can't blame him for the ruination of the church just because he was acting like all politicians act. They act like politicians. Surprise, surprise. They're concerned for their own skin and for the maintenance of money and power and authority and control. And they will do and say anything to anybody to maintain their dominance. So, there would be those who would try to persuade me that a guy who is authorizing and building pagan temples in the middle of his reign is a quote-unquote Christian. I don't believe it. And I think this discovery by the University of St. Louis just puts that whole conversation to bed. It's just not sustainable, viable anymore. Now, as I said in the other episode, was the wedding or the union of state-sanctioned power, might, the sword and the drachma or whatever they were using for money, was the wedding of those two things, which did happen under the reign of Constantine, good for the church? No, it was not. But let's stop with this mythology about Constantine being a Christian after the experience on the Milvian Bridge. Don't believe it. Talk to you next time.